Hello everybody, and I'll be reading you Alex Rider books. Third book and fourth episode. And page 205 out of 300 pages. The first book I read was 300 pages. I've read books with actually 800 pages before. AKA Harry Potter. Alex Rider, chapter 11, The Crusher. Alex couldn't move. He was lying on his back on a hard, sticky surface. When he tried to raise his shoulders, he felt his t-shirt clinging to whatever was underneath him. It was as if he had been glued into place. Whatever had been injected into him had removed all power of movement from his arms and legs. The bag still covered his head, keeping him in the darkness. He knew that he had been loaded into the speedboat and taken back to the coast. Some sort of van had met him and brought him here. He had heard footsteps and rough hands had grabbed him, carrying him like a sack of vegetables. He guessed that 3 or 4 men had been involved in the journey, but they had barely spoke. Once he had heard the same man who had spoken to him on the boat. He had muttered a couple of words in Spanish, but his voice was so indistinct. The words so indistinct, but his voice was so indistinct, the words so garbled, that Alex had found it hard to understand what he was saying. Fingers brushed against the side of his neck, and suddenly the bag was removed. Alex blinked. He was lying in a brightly lit warehouse or factory. The first thing he saw was the metal framework supporting the roof with arc lamps hanging down. The walls were bare brick, whitewashed, the floor lined with terracotta tiles. There was machinery on both sides of him. Most of it looked agricultural and 100 years out of date. There were chains and buckets and a complicated pulley system that fed into a series of metal wheels that could have came out of a giant antique watch, and next to them a pair of earthenware cauldrons. Alex twisted round and saw more cauldrons on the other side, and in the distance some sort of filtration system with pipes leading everywhere. He realized now that he was laying on a conveyor belt. He tried once again to get up or even roll off, but his body won't obey. A man slipped into his line of vision. Alex looked up into a pair of eyes that weren't actually quite a pair. They weren't positioned correctly in the man's face, and one of them was bloodshot. Alex wondered if it could even see. The man had been horribly injured at some time. He was bald on one side of his head, but not on the other. His mouth was slanting. His skin was dead. In the beauty contest, he wouldn't even come close to second to the great white shark. There were a couple of dark, unsmiling workers standing beside him. They were shabbily dressed with moustaches and bandanas. Neither of them spoke. They seemed keenly interested in what was about to happen. Your name? The movements of the man's mouth didn't quite match what he was saying, so seeing him speak was a bit like watching a badly dubbed film. Alex Gardner, Alex said. Your real name? I just told you. You lied. Your real name is Alex Rider. Why ask if you think you know? The man nodded as if Alex had asked a fair question. My name is Conrad, he said. We have met before. Have we? Alex tried to think. Then he remembered the man he had seen limping down the boardwalk in Miami wearing sunglasses and a straw hat. It was the same man. Conrad leaned forward. Why are you here? He asked. I'm on vacation with my mom and dad. Alex decided it was time to pretend he's just an ordinary 14-year-old. Where are they? He demanded. Why have you brought me here? What happened to the man on the boat? I want to go home. Where is your home? Conrad asked. I live in L.A. D. Flora Street, West Hollywood. No. There was no doubt at all in Conrad's voice. Your accent is very convincing, but you are not American. You are English. The people you came were called Tom Turner and Belinda Troy. They were agents of the CIA. They are now dead. I don't know what you're talking about. You are the wrong guy. Conrad smiled. At least one side of his mouth smiled, the other could only manage a slight twitch. Lying to me is stupid and a waste of time. I have to know why you are here, he said. It is an unusual experience to interrogate a child, but it is one that I shall enjoy. You are the only one left. So tell me, Alex Ryder, why did you come to Cairo Esquileto? Were you planning to do? I wasn't planning to do anything. Despite everything, Alex thought it was worth a one last try. You're still speaking with an American accent. My dad's a film producer. He's got nothing to do with CIA. Who are you, and why have you brought me here? I'm losing my patience. Conrad took a break, as if the effort of talking was too much for him. Tell me what I want to know. I'm on vacation, Alex said. I've already told you. You have told me lies. Now you will tell me the truth. Conrad digged down and picked up a large metal box with two buttons, one red, one green, attached to a thick cable. He pressed the green button. At once Alex felt a jolt underneath him. An alarm bell rang. Somewhere in the distance there was a loud whine as the machine started up. A few seconds, the conveyor began to move. Using all its strength, Alex fought against the drug that was in his system, pulling up that he saw. What he thought was what he saw sent a spasm of shock all the way through him. He had swam, and he thought he was going to faint. The conveyor belt was carrying him towards two huge spinning grindstones about 7 meters away. They were so close to each other that they were almost touching. There was one underneath and one on top. The belt stopped just at the point where they met. Alex was slumped helplessly on the belt. There was nothing he could do. He was moving towards the grindstones at a rate of about 10 centimeters a second. It would take him a little over a minute to reach them. When he did finally get there, he would be crushed. That was a death this amount of rage for him. Do you know how sugar was produced? Conrad asked. This place where you are now is a sugar mill. The machinery used to be steam-powered, but now it is electric. The sugar cane was delivered here by the colonists. The farmers, it was shredded and then placed on the belt to be crushed. After that, it was filtered. Water allowed to evaporate. Then the remaining syrup was placed in cauldrons and heated so that it formed crystals. Conrad paused to draw breath. You, Alex, are at the beginning of that process. You are about to be fed into the crusher. I ask you to imagine the pain that lies ahead of you. Your toes will enter first, then you'll be sucked in 1 centimeter at a time. After your toes, your feet, your legs, your knees. How much of you will pass through before you're allowed the comfort of death? Think about it, whatever else it is. I can promise you that it would not be sweet. Conrad raised the box. Tell me what I want to know, and I will press this red button. It stops the machine. You're wrong, Alex shouted. You can't do this. I am doing this, and I am never wrong. Please do not waste any more time. You have so little of it left. Alex lifted his head up again. the grindstones. It was getting so closer with every second that passed. He could feel their vibration transmitted down the conveyor belt. How much did the agents know? Conrad demanded. Why were they here? Alex thumped back. The pounding of the two stones enveloped him. He looked back past Conrad at the other two men. What would they let him do this? But their faces were impassive. Please! He shouted. Then stopped himself. There was no mercy in this man. He'd seen that one at once. He gritted his teeth, biting back his fear. He wanted to cry. He could actually feel the tears in his eyes. This wasn't what he wanted. He had never asked to be a spy. Why should he expect to die like one? You have perhaps 50 seconds more, Conrad said. And then that was when Alex was getting made. It was right. There's no point in going silently to a bloody and unacceptable death. This wasn't a World War II film with him as the hero. He was a schoolboy, and everyone, Miss Jones, the CIA, had lied to him and played tricks on him to get him here. Anyway, Conrad already knew who he was. He had called him by his real name. Conrad knew that Troy and Turner had been American spies. There was only one piece of information he could add. The CIA were looking for a nuclear bomb. And why shouldn't he tell Conrad that? Maybe he never stopped him from using it. They were searching for a bomb, he cried out. A nuclear bomb. They know Sarah bought uranium from the salesman. They came here with a detail counter. They were going to break into the villa and look for the bomb. How did they know? I don't know. 30 seconds. The rumbling pounding was louder than ever. And he looked up and saw the stones less than 3 meters away. Air was rushing between them and flowing over him. He could feel the breeze cold on his skin. The fact he wasn't tied down, that his arms and legs were free, only made it all the worse. He couldn't move. The drug had turned him into a piece of living meat. On its way to the mincer, perspiration flowed down the side of his face and followed the line on his door and curved behind his neck. It was Turner, Alex yelled. He found out from the salesman. He was working undercover. They found out that he'd sold you the uranium, and they came here looking for the bomb. Did they know the purpose of the bomb? No, I don't know. They didn't tell me. Now stop the machine and let me go. Conrad considered for a moment. The box was still in his hand. No, he said. I don't think so. What? Alex screamed the single word. He could barely hear himself over the noise of the grindstones. You've been a bad boy. Conrad said, and bad boys have to be punished. But you said I lied, just like you. But of course I must kill you. You are of no further use. Alex went mad at you, opened his mouth and screamed, trying to find the strength to separate himself from the conveyor belt. His brain knew what it wanted. His body refused to obey. It was useless. He jerked up, but his feet were moving even closer to the spinning stones. Conrad took a step back. He was going to watch Alex. He was going to watch as Alex was fed through the crusher. The two workers behind him would clear up when it was over. No! Alex howled. Goodbye, Alex, Conrad said. Then another voice in another language, one that Alex didn't understand. Conrad said something Alex could no longer hear. The man's lips moved, but any sound was snatched away by the wall of the machine. Alex's bare toes were being battered by the wind that forced through the stones. They were 5 centimeters away from being crushed. 4 centimeters, 3 centimeters, 2 centimeters. There was a gunshot. There was a gunshot. Sparked the smell of stone. The grindstones were still spinning, but the conveyor belt had stopped. Alex's feet were just hanging over the end of the belt. You know my feel the spinning stones racing past his toes. And then the voice came again, speaking English. My dear Alex, I'm so sorry. Are you all right? Alex tried to reply with the worst swear word he knew, but it wouldn't come. He couldn't even breathe. With a sense of gratitude, he passed out. You will have to forgive Conrad. He is an excellent assistant and useful in so many ways, but he can also be a little enthusiastic. I said, we're going to have the most magnificent bedroom we had ever seen. He was lying on a 4-poster bed opposite a floor-to-ceiling mirror in an ornate gold frame. All the furniture in the room was antique and wouldn't have been out of place in the museum. There was a painted chest at the foot of the bed, a massive wardrobe with elaborately carved doors, a chandelier with 5 curving arms. The shutters on the window had been folded back to reveal a wrought iron balustrade looking out over a courtyard. The man who had introduced himself as General Alexei Sarov, who was sitting on a chair next to the mirror, dressed in a dark suit. His legs were crossed. His back was completely straight. Alex examined the face with its grey hair and intelligent blue eyes. He recognized his voice from the sugar mill and knew, without knowing why, that was the general who had saved him. It was dark outside. Alex guessed it must be after midnight. Someone had dressed him in a white nightshirt that came down to his knees. He wondered how long he had been asleep and how long the Russian had been waiting for him to wake up. Do you want something to eat? That had been his first question. No, thank you. I'm not hungry. I'll drink them. Some water. I have some here. The water came in a silver jug, served in a gleaming crystal glass. General Sarov poured it himself, then handed it to Alex. Alex reached out, grateful that the drug Conrad had pumped into him had worn off while he was asleep, and he could move his arms again. He sipped. The water was ice cold. That was when Sarov began his apology, speaking in faultless English. Conrad had no orders to eliminate you. On the contrary, when I found out who you were, I very much wanted to meet you. I wondered about that, but he decided to ignore it for the moment. How did you find out who I was? He asked. There seemed no point in denying it now. We are a very sophisticated security system, both here and in Havana. The general seemed uninterested in explaining more. I'm afraid you've had a terrible ordeal. The people I came here with had a worse one. Again, the general raised a hand, brushing aside the details. Your friends are dead. Were they your friends, Alex? A brief pause. I was, of course, perfectly well aware of the Devil's Chimney when I first moved in Castle d'Oro. I had a simple defense mechanism constructed. Diving is prohibited on the side. So when the occasional diver is foolish enough to enter the cave, he's only paying the price of his curiosity. They tell me that a shark was killed there. It was a very white shark. You saw it? Alex said nothing. So raised his hands, resting on his chin on the tip of his fingers. You are as remarkable as I was told, he continued. I read your file, Alex. You have no parents. You were raised by an uncle who was himself a spy. You were trained by a special air service, the SAS, and sent on your first mission in the south of England, and then just a few weeks later to France. Some would say that you have had the luck of the devil, but I do not personally believe in the devil or in God, for that matter. But I believe in you, Alex. You are quite unique. Alex was getting tired of all this flattery, and he couldn't help but feel that there was something sinister in it. Why am I here? He asked. What do you want with me? Why you are here should be self-evident. Sarah answered. Conrad wanted to kill you. I prevented him, but I cannot allow you to return to your hotel or indeed leave this island. You have to consider yourself my prisoner. Although, if the Casa d'Oro is a prison, I hope you will find it a comfortable one. As to what I want with you, Sarah smiled to it. His eyes suddenly distant. It is late, he announced suddenly. We can talk about that in the morning. He stood up. Is it true that you have a nuclear bomb? Alex asked. Yes. Part of the puzzle fell into place. You bought uranium from the salesman that ordered Conrad to kill him. You blew up his boat. That is correct. But Alex had been right all along. He had seen Conrad in Miami, going on to put some sort of explosive device on the Mayfair lady, And it was that, not the fire, that caused his destruction and loss of life. Owen and Troy had accused him unfairly. The nuclear bomb, Alex asked. Alex said, "What are you going to do with it?" "Are you afraid?" "I want to know." The general considered. "I'll tell you only this for now," he said. "I do not imagine that you know a great deal about my country, Alex. The Union of Socialist Republics, as it was once called. This USSR, Russia, as it is today. I do not suppose these things are taught to you in your Western schools. I know that communism is finished, if that's what you mean," Alex said. "And it's a bit late for a history lesson." "My country was once a world power." Sarah continued, ignoring him. "It was one of the most powerful nations on Earth. Who put the first man into space? We did. Who made the greatest advances in science and technology? Who was feared by the rest of the world?" He paused. "You are right. Yes, communism had been driven out. And what do you see in its place?" A flicker of anger appeared on his face. "They were only for a second rate. There's no law and order. The prisons are empty, and criminals control the streets. The politicians and businessmen are corrupt. Do they care about people anymore? No, you'll find them in the south of France, on super yachts, enjoying the millions they have stolen. And in Moscow, the people wear Levi jeans. They eat McDonald's and talk on their mobile phones and forget their history, their identity." General Sarah walked over to the door. "You asked me what I'm going to do," he said. "I'm going to turn back the page and undo the damage of the last 30 years. I'm going to give my country back its pride and its position on the world stage. I'm not an evil man, Alex. Whatever your superiors may have told you, my only wish is to stop the disease and make the world a better place. The world a better place. I hope you can believe that. It matters very much to me that you should come to see things my way." "You have a nuclear bomb," Alex said to the speaker. "So I don't understand. How is that going to help you achieve what you want?" "That," my young friend Alex, "will be revealed in time. Let us have breakfast together at 9 o'clock. Then I will show you around the estate." General Sarov nodded and left the room. Alex waited a minute before slipping out of bed. He looked out into the courtyard, then went and tried the door. He wasn't surprised by what he found. Sarah had described the Casa de Oro as a prison, and he was right. There was no way Alex could climb down into the courtyard, and the bedroom door was locked. Chapter 12. The House of Slaves. A knock at the door woke Alex just after 8 o'clock. Next morning, as he sat up in bed, a woman dressed in black with a white apron came in, carrying a case which he recognized as his own. Sarah must have sent someone to the Hotel Valencia to collect it. Alex waited until the woman had gone, then got quickly out of bed and opened it. All his clothes were there. So were the Tyrannosaurus Rex figurine and the bubblegum that Smithers had given him. Only the mobile phone had gone. Clearly, Sarah didn't want him to phone home. After what Sarah had said the night before, he decided to leave his levies in the case. Instead, he chose a pair of baggy shorts and a plain t-shirt, and the Havanes flip-flops he had last used when he was surfing in Cornwall. He got dressed and went over to the window. The courtyard he had seen the night before was now bathed in sunlight. It was rectangular in shape, surrounded by a marble walkway and a series of arched colonnades. 2 servants were sweeping the fine sand which covered the ground. 2 more were watering the plants He looked up and saw the watchtower that he had noticed from the road. There was still a garden place. His machine gun clearly visible again. At 10 to 9, the door opened again. This time it was Conrad who came in, wearing a black shirt, buttoned to the neck, black trousers, and sandals that revealed 4 toes on one foot, only 3 on the other. Desayuno. Alex recognized the Spanish word for breakfast. Conrad had spat the single word out, as if it offended him to say it. He was clearly unhappy to see Alex again, but then, of course, he'd had other plans. Good morning, Conrad. Alex forced a smile to his face. After what had happened the night before, he was determined to show that the man didn't scare him. He pointed. You seem to have forgotten some of your toes. He walked over to the door. As he passed through into the corridor, Conrad suddenly close to him. It isn't over yet, he whispered. The general may change his mind. Alex continued forward. He found himself in a wide corridor above, a second courtyard. He looked down at a stone fountain surrounded by white pillars. He could smell perfume in the air. The sound of water rippled through the house. Conrad pointed and Alex took a staircase down and into a room where breakfast had already been served. General Sarah was sitting at a huge polished table eating a plate of fruit. He was wearing a tracksuit. He smiled as Alex came in, a gesture towards an empty seat. There was a dozen to choose from. Good morning, Alex. You'll have to forgive my clothes. I always run for breakfast. 3 times around the plantation, a distance of 24 miles. I'll change later. Did you sleep well? Yes, thank you. Help yourself, please, to breakfast. There's fruit and cereals, fresh breads, eggs. Personally, I eat my eggs raw. This is a habit I have followed throughout my life. To cook food is to remove half its goodness up in smoke. He raised a hand in the air. Man is the only creature on the planet that needs to have its meat and vegetables burned or boiled before he can consume them. However, if you wish, I can have some eggs prepared the way you like. No thanks, Daniel. I'll stick with the fruit and cereal. So I've noticed Conrad standing at the door. I don't need you now. Thank you, Conrad. We'll meet again at midday. Conrad's one good eye narrowed. He nodded and left the room. I'm afraid Conrad doesn't like you, Sarah said. That's all right. I'm not crazy about Conrad. Alex glanced at the door. What exactly is the matter with him? He asked. He doesn't look well. By any rights, he should be dead. He was involved in an explosion with a bomb, which he happened to be carrying at the time. Conrad is something of a scientific miracle. There are more than 30 metal pins in his body. He has a metal plate in his skull. There are metal wires in his jaw, and in most of his major joints. He must have set off a lot of alarms in the airports, Alex muttered. I would advise you not to make fun of him, Alex. He still very much hopes to kill you. So touched his lip with a napkin. I won't allow it to happen, but while we are discussing such unpleasant matters, perhaps I should lay down some house rules. So to speak, I removed the mobile telephone which I found in your case, and I should tell you that all phones in the house require a code before they can be used. You are to make no contact with the outside world. My people may worry about me, Alex said. From what I know about Mr. Blunt and his colleagues in London, that is unlikely, but it's unimportant. By the time they began to ask questions, it would be too late. Too late? Why? Alex realized he was still completely in the dark. The Casa de Oro is fenced all around. The fence is electrified. There is only one entrance, and it is well guarded. Do not attempt to escape. Alex, if you do, you may be shot. And that is not all. What I have planned after today, I'm afraid I'll be moving you to new quarters. As you may well be aware, I have important guests arriving, and it would be better for you to have your own space, as I believe you say. You're still welcome to use the house, the pool, the grounds, but I would ask you to remain invisible. My guests speak very little English, so there is no point approaching them. If you cause me an embarrassment, I'll have you whipped. General Sarah reached forward and promised a slice of pineapple. But that's enough of this unpleasantness, he said. We have the whole morning together. Do you ride? Alex hesitated. He didn't like horse riding. I didn't like horse riding. I have ridden, he said. Excellent. Alex helped himself to some melon. I asked you last night what you wanted with me. He said. You've given me a good reply. All in good time, Alex, all in good time. After breakfast, they walked out into the open air. Now Alex understood how the house had got its name. It was made of some sort of pale yellow brick with the sun beating down. It really did look gold. Although the house was only 2 stories high, it was spread over a vast area with wide stone steps leading down to a formal garden. Mont had described it as a palace, but it was more elegant than majestic, with slender doors and windows, more archways and finely carved balustrades looking at the house. It was as if nothing had changed since the early 19th century when it had been built. But there were also armed guards on patrol. There were armed alarm bells and a series of spotlights mounted on metal brackets, ugly reminders of the modern age. They continued over to a stable block where I was waiting with 2 magnificent horses. A white stallion for Sarah, a smaller grey for Alex. Riding was a sport that Alex had never enjoyed. Last time he had got onto a horse, it had almost killed him, and it was with reluctance that he took hold of the reins and swung himself into the saddle. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Sarah do the same and knew at once that the Russian was an expert in total control of his steed. They rode out together, Alex trying to keep his balance and not look too out of control. Fortunately, his horse seemed to know where they were going. This was a sugar farm once, so explained, repeating what Troy had already told him. Slaves worked here. There were almost 1 million slaves in Cuba and KOS Gwinnett. He pointed at the tower. That was the watchtower. They would ring a bell there at 4:30 in the morning for the slaves to start work. They were brought here from West Africa. They worked here and they died here. They passed close to a low rectangular building some from the main house. Alex noticed that the single door and all the windows were barred. This is Barracoon, Sarah said, the house of slaves. 200 of them had slept in there, penned in like animals. If you have time, I'll show you the punishment block. We still have the original stocks. Can you imagine, Alex, being fastened by your ankles for weeks or even months at a time? Unable to move, starving and thirsty. I don't want to imagine it, Alex said. Of course not. The Western world prefers to forget the crimes that made it rich. Alex was relieved when they broke into a canter. At least meant there was no further need to talk. They followed a dirt track that brought them to the edge of the sea. Looking down, Alex could see where Garcia's boat had been moored the day before. It reminded him of the true nature of man with him. Sarah was being friendly. He evidently enjoyed having Alex as his guest. But he was a killer. And the killer was a nuclear bomb. They came to the end of the track and continued more slowly, with the sea on their right. The Casa de Oro had disappeared behind them. "I wish to tell you something about myself," Sarah said suddenly. "In fact, I will tell you more than I have ever told anyone else." He waited for a few moments in silence. "I was born in 1940, he began. "This was during the Second World War, the year before the Germans attacked my country. Perhaps that is why I have always been a patriot. Why I have always thought my country should come first. I've spent much of my life serving it, in the army, fighting for what I believe in. I still believe I am serving it now." He reined in his horse and turned to Alex, who had stopped beside him. "I got married when I was 30. A year later, my wife gave me something I had always wanted. A son. His name was Vladimir. And from the moment he drew his first breath, he was the best thing in my life. He grew into a handsome boy. And let me tell you, no father could have been prouder than I was of him. He did well at school, top in almost every class. He was a first-class athlete. I think he could one day have competed at Olympic level, but that was not to be." Alex already knew the end of his story. Remember what Blunt had told him? "I believe it was right for Vladimir to serve his country, just as I had." So went on. "I wanted him to join the army. His mother disagreed. Unfortunately, that disagreement ended our marriage. You asked her to leave?" "No, I didn't ask her to leave. I ordered her to. She departed from my house, and I never saw her again. And Vladimir did join the army. This was the week after his 16th birthday. He was flown to Afghanistan, where we were fighting a hard, difficult war. He'd been there for just 3 weeks when he was sent to reconnoitring a village as a patrol. A sniper shot him and he died." Sarah's voice cracked briefly and he stopped. But a moment later he continued in careful measured tone. "The war ended a year later. Our government, weak and cowardly, had lost the spirit to fight. He withdrew the whole thing that had been for nothing. And this is what you must understand. This is the truth. There's nothing more terrible in this world than for a father to lose his son." He took a breath. "I believe I have lost Vladimir forever, until I met you." "Me?" Alex was almost too startled to speak. "You are 2 years younger than Vladimir when he was dying, but you have so much in common with him. Alex, even though you were brought up on the other side of the world, there is first a very slight resemblance, but it is not just your physical appearance. You too are serving for your country. 14 years old and a spy. How rare is it to find any young person who is prepared to fight for his beliefs?" "Well, I wouldn't go that far," Alex muttered. "You have courage. That business at the sugar factory and the game would prove it. If you track record, you didn't speak very small. You speak many languages, and one day soon you can learn Russian. You ride, you dive, you fight, and you aren't scared. I've never met a boy like you, except one. You are like my Vladimir, Alex. And that is what I hope you will become." What are you getting at?" Alex asked. They still weren't moving, and he began to feel the heat of the sun. The water was sweating and attracting flies. The sea was a long way beneath them. "Isn't it obvious? I read your file. You have grown up on your own. You have an uncle, but you have grown up on your own. You had an uncle, but you didn't even know what he was until he died. You have no parents. I have no son. We are both alone. We are a world apart, General. We don't need to be. I am planning something that will change the world forever. When I am finished, the world will be a better, stronger, healthier place. You came here to prevent that happening, but when you understand what I'm doing, you'll see that we do not need to be your enemies. On the contrary, I want to adopt you. Alex stared. He didn't know what to say. You will be my son, Alex, and you will continue where Vladimir left off. I will be a father to you, and we will share the new world I create. Don't speak now, just consider. If I really believe you were my enemy, I would have allowed Conrad to kill you. But for the moment I found out who you were, I knew that you couldn't be. We even had the same name, you and I, Alexia and Alex. I will adopt you, Alex, and will become the father you have lost. And what if I say no? You will. And what if I say no? And what if I say no? You will not say no. Violence had slid into his eyes, like smoke behind him. His face was twisted, as if in pain. So he took a deep breath. Suddenly he was calm. When you know the plan, you will join me. Then why don't you tell me the plan? Tell me, what are you going to do? Not yet, Alex. You're not ready yet, but you will be. And it will all happen very soon. General Alexei Sarov pulled on his reins. The horse spun around and he galloped off, leaving the sea behind him. And he shook his head in wonderment. Then he kicked at the flanks of his own followers and followed. That evening, Alex ate on his own. Sarov had excused himself, saying he had work to do. Alex didn't have much appetite. Conrad stood in the room watching him every mouthful, and although he didn't speak, anger and hostility radiated out of him. The moment Alex finished, Conrad signalled a single hand pointed the door. He followed Conrad out of the main house, down the steps and into the slave quarters. The barracoon the Sarov had shown him earlier. It seemed that this was to be the new accommodation. The inside of the building was divided into a series of cells with bare brick walls and thick doors, each with a square grille in the centre. But at least it had been modernised. There was electricity, fresh water, and mercifully in the heat of the night, air conditioning. Alex knew he was a lot luckier than the hundreds of lost souls who had been once confirmed here. There was a basin at the toilet, hidden behind the screen in the cell. Alex's case had been carried over and placed on a bed which had a metal frame and a thick mattress, which was still comfortable enough. Sarov has also provided him with books to read. Alex glanced at the covers. They were English translations of Russian classics, Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. He guessed they must have been Vladimir's favourite authors. Conrad closed and locked the door. "Good night, Conrad," Alex called out. "I'll call you if I need anything." He managed to glimpse a bloodshot eye, just peering through the grill, and knew that he had scored a point. Then Conrad was gone. Alex lay on the bed for some time, thinking about what Sarov had said. Adoption? It was almost too much for him to take in. Only a week ago he had wondered what it would be like to have a father. How two of them had turned up at once. First Tom Turner, and now Sarov. The things were definitely going from bad to worse. There was a burst of light outside the window. Night had been replaced by a high electric day light. And he got off bed and went over to the bay window. It looked out onto the main square. At the front house, the electric lights he had noticed earlier had all come on, and the square was full of people. The guards, dozens of them, had formed a line, machine guns resting against their chests. Servants and plantation workers had gathered around the door. Sarov himself was there in a dark green uniform, several medals pinned to his chest. Conrad was behind him. As Alex watched, 4 black limousines appeared, driving slowly along the lane that led up from the gatehouse. They were escorted by 2 motorcycles, the riders, like Sarov in military dress. Dust spiraled behind the convoy, twisting up into the electric light. They stopped, the car doors opened, and about 15 men got out. Alex could barely make out their faces against the blinding light. They were little more than silhouette. When he saw one man smaller than a ball dressed in a suit, Sarah moved forward to meet him. The two men shook hands, then embraced. It was a signal for everyone to relax. Sarah gestured, and the whole group began to move towards the house, leaving the motorcycles behind. Alex suddenly had seen the bald man before in the newspaper. He now knew why he had been locked up in the slaves' quarters, out of harm's way. Whatever Sarah's plan was, the next phase had just begun. The Russian president had arrived. Chapter 13. Heartbeat. Alex was let out of the slave house the following morning. It seemed he was going to be allowed to spend the day at liberty in the Casa di Oro, although not in his own. An armed guard had been standing to watch over him. The guard was in his 20s, roughly shaven. He spoke no English. He had Alex first to breakfast, which he had on his own in the kitchen, not in the dining room, where he had eaten with Sarah. While Alex ate, he stared at the door, watching him nervously, as if he was a firework that had just failed to go off. "¿Cómo se llama usted?" Alex asked. "What's your name?" "Juan." The guard was reckless and departed with even that piece of information, and answered the rest of Alex's question with monosyllables or silence. It was another blazing hot day. The island seemed to be caught in the grip of an endless summer. Alex finished his breakfast and went out in the main hall, where a few of the servants were as ever sweeping the floor carrying supper supplies in the kitchen. The guards were still in place up in the tower and around the perimeter, and made his way to the stables. He wondered if he would be allowed to go riding again, and was apparently surprised when the guard brought out his grey for him, already saddled and prepared. He set off a second time, with Juan just a few paces behind him on a chestnut mare. Alex didn't particularly want to go riding. His thighs and backside were still sore from the day before, but he was interested in the perimeter fence that Sarah had mentioned. He had said that it was electrified, but even electric fences sometimes pass trees that can be climbed. And Alex had already decided that he had to find a way out. He still had no idea what Sarah was planning. He had talked of changing the world, making it better, stronger, healthier. He obviously thought of himself as some sort of hero, but he was a hero, armed with a nuclear bomb. As he rode across the long grass, Alex wondered what Sarah intended to do. His first thought was that a Russian was going to blow up an American city. Hadn't America once been Russia's greatest enemy? That made no sense. Millions of people would die, but it wouldn't change the world. Certainly not for the better. Could his target be somewhere in Europe, or perhaps he was going to use the bomb to blackmail world governments into giving him what he wanted? That seemed more likely, but at the same time, Alex doubted it. Whatever he was planning, in some way involved the Russian president. I'm going to turn back the page and undo the damage of the last 30 years. Suddenly, Alex knew that despite their childhood friendship, Sarah hated the Russian president and wanted to take his place. That was what this was all about, a new Russia that would once again be a world power with Sarah at its head. And he was going to achieve with a single nuclear blast. Alex had to escape. He had to tell the CIA that Turner and Troy had been killed, and that Sarah did have a bomb. And once they knew, they would take over, and he wanted to put as many kilometers between himself and the Casa di Oro as he could. Sarah's feelings for him. He decided to adopt him. Bothered him as much as anything else. The old man was slightly mad. True, Sarah had saved his life, but it was Sarah who had put his life in danger in the first place. Despite the heat of the morning, Alex shivered. This whole adventure had turned into something that was rapidly spinning out of control. They had reached the edge of the plantation, this time on the side away from the sea. And there, sure enough, was the fence. About 5 meters high, solid steel with a smaller fence coming up to chest level on either side. There were large red signs with the single word "Pedagogue" printed in white letters. Even without warning, the fence reeked of danger. There was low humming that seemed to be coming from the ground. Alex noted a showered and broken skeleton or a bird hanging on the wire. He must have flown into the fence and been killed instantly. Well, one thing was certain. He wasn't going to climb over the fence stretched through the grassland with barely a single tree in sight. Alex turned his horse towards the bottom end of the plantation and the entrance gate. Maybe he would be able to find a way through there. It took them about half an hour to reach it. Riding at walking pace, the fence continued all the way. The entrance was marked by a crumbling stone guardhouse with no glasses in the window, and a door hanging half off its hinges. There were 2 men inside, a third with a machine gun standing beside a barrier. As Alex reached them, a car passed through. One of the limousines that he had seen the night before was leaving the compound. That gave him an idea. There was only one way out of here, and that was in a car. Presumably the president's men would be making several journeys. That might give him a chance. They rode back to the stables and dismounted, with Juan a few steps behind him. Alex walked back into the house. Almost at once he heard voices coming from the other side and a splash of water. He crossed across the inner courtyard, past the fountain, and went through an archway. There was a swimming pool on the other side, long and rectangular, with palm trees growing on both sides, casting natural shadows over the table, and sun lounges on the distance. He saw a newly constructed tennis court. There were changing rooms at the sauna, an outside bar. From the back, the Casa de Oro looked like the playpen of a multi-millionaire. Sarah was sitting at a table with the president, both of them holding drinks, water for Sarah and cocktail for his guest. The president had changed into red shorts and a flowery short-sleeved shirt that hung loosely off his slight frame. There were 4 men standing close to him. It was obvious that they were the presidential bodyguard. The men were huge, dressed in black with uniform, sunglasses, and a coil of wire disappeared into their ears. There was something about almost ludicrous about the scene. The little man in his holiday clothes, the giant bodyguards. Alex looked at the pool. There were 3 strikingly attractive women sitting on the side, their feet dangling in the water. They were all in their 20s, wearing bikinis. They looked local. Alex was surprised to see them. He had thought Sarah was too cold-blooded to enjoy such a company, or they had been invited here for the president. Alex wondered what he was about. Alex wondered if he was meant to be in this part of the grounds and was about to leave when Sarah saw him and waved a hand, calling him over with a sense of growling curiosity. Alex walked over. Sarah spoke quickly to the president, who nodded and smiled. "Good morning, Alex." Sarah seemed unusually cheerful. "I understand you went out riding again. Please let me introduce you to my old friend, Boris Kirienko, the President of Russia." "Boris, this is the boy I was telling you about." The Russian president reached out and took Alex's hand. Alex could smell the alcohol on his breath. Whatever he was drinking in the cocktail, he'd had too much of it. "It is a pleasure. "It is a pleasure," he said, in a heavily accented English. He pointed his finger at Alex's face and broke into Russia. Alex heard the name Vladimir mentioned twice. Sarah answered briefly and translated for Alex. "He says that you remind him of my son." He smiled. "Would you like to swim, Alex? You look as if you need it." Alex glanced at the three girls. "Unusual lifeguards," he said. Sarah laughed. "Some company for the president he is off. He is after all on holiday. Although unfortunately we do have a little work to do. Our local television station is naturally interested that we have such a distinguished visitor. Boris has agreed to give a brief interview. The crew will be here any minute now." The president nodded, but Alex wasn't sure if he'd understood. "You can have the pool to yourself, but we're going into San to go after lunch. But I hope you'll join us for dinner, Alex. The chef has planned a special surprise for the main course." There was a movement at the archway leading into the house. Conrad had appeared, and with him a short, serious-looking woman in a drab olive green dress. The two men behind her, with cameras and lighting equipment. "Ah, here they are." Sam turned back to the president. Suddenly Alex was forgotten. He stripped to his swimming shorts and dived into the pool. After the long horse ride, the water was cool and refreshing. He noticed the three girls watching him as he swam past. One of them winked at him, another giggled. Meanwhile, the camera crew was setting up its equipment in the shade of the palm trees. The Russian president waved a hand, and one of his bodyguards brought over another cocktail. I was surprised that such an insignificant-looking man could be the head of a huge country. But then he thought, politicians try to look good on TV. They wear smart suits and surround themselves with smart cars and bodyguards. But at the end of the day, they're only people, the same as everyone else. Alex put him out of his thoughts and concentrated on his swimming. In his mind, he went over what Sarah had said. They were driving into the city after lunch. Them and the cars would be leaving the compound. It was his only chance. Alex knew that there was no way off the island. The moment he was found missing, the alarm would be raised. Every guard at the airport would be on the lookout for him, and he doubted if he would be able to get on a boat. But if he could at least find a telephone that worked without an access code, we would get in touch with the American mainland, and they would send someone to pull him out. He finished his 8 length, and twisted around for a 9th. The Russian president was sitting in a chair, breathing wide for the sound. Juan, Alex's personal guard, was waiting for him at the other end of the pool. Alex sighed. He was going to have to do something about Juan. The television interview again began. Sarah was watching carefully, and again Alex got the impression that there was more to all this than met the eye. He pulled himself out of the pool, and went back to his quarters to get changed. Alex wore another pair of shorts and an Air-Tex shirt, both of them chosen because they were neutral colours, allowing him to blend in with the background. In his pocket he had a stick of the bubble gum that Smith had given him. Everything went according to plan. He was going to need it. Juan was standing outside the room. Alex was suddenly nervous about what he was going to do. After all, Sarah had warned him what would happen if he tried to escape. He would be shot, or at the very least whipped. But then he had thought of the nuclear bomb. Sarah had to be stopped. His mind was made up. He stopped suddenly and groaned, his whole face contorted with pain, and staggered to one side, putting out a hand to stop himself falling. Juan started entering the room with a strange look on. At the moment Alex straightened up, his foot shot out into Out in the perfect timing, roundhouse kick that slammed into the soft flesh of the man's stomach. Joanne didn't even cry out. With all the breath knocked out of him, he crumbled to the ground and lay still. Not for the first time, Alex thanked the 5 years training that had given him a black belt. First grade Dan in karate. Now he moved fast. He took the sheet of the bed and tore it into strips. He tied the man's hands, feet, then gagged him. Finally, he slipped out of the room, locking it behind him. It would be hours before the guard was found. By that time, he would be away. He came out of the balcony. The black limousine was still parked in front of the villa, waiting for the president and his men to leave. There was nobody in sight. I sprinted forward. Sally had allowed him to wander around the grounds of the plantation, but only if he was accompanied. If anyone saw him without his guard, they might guess what had happened. He reached the edge of the house and stopped breathlessly. His back against the wall, even the short run had made him sweat in the intense heat of the afternoon. He examined the cars. There were 3 of them. The one that had left earlier in the morning still hadn't come back. The question was, when the president went into Santiago, which one would he take? Or would all 3 accompany him? I was splattered out when he heard footsteps pointing around the side of the house. It was either guards or workers. The moment they turned the corner, they would see him. There was an outdoor to one side. I had noticed it before. He fumbled just before the handle. Fortunately, it was locked. Just as 2 men in military dress appeared a few meters away. Both armed, he slipped inside, closing the door behind him. A chill of air conditioning system brushed over him. He looked around. It was in a part of house that looked completely different to the rest. Here, the wooden floors and antique furniture had given way to a high-tech modern look. Halogen lighting led the way down a short corridor with glass doors on either side. Intrigued, Alex crept forward. He came to the first door and looked inside. There were 2 technicians sitting gazing at the bank of TV screens. The room was large and looked like an editing suite in a television studio. I seized the door open. There was no chance that the technicians would hear him. They were both wearing headphones plugged into the machinery in front of them. Alex looked at the screens. Every room in the main house was under observation. He recognized at once in which he had woken up. There was the kitchen, the dining room, the main courtyard, with 2 of the president's men strolling across. He turned to another screen and stared. He was watching himself swimming lengths in the pool that had been recorded too. And there was Sarah sitting with his glass of water while on the next screen next to him, the president gave his interview to the crew that Alex had seen arrive. It took Alex a moment to work out exactly what he was seeing. Everything was being recorded and edited. That was what the 2 technicians were doing now. The arrival of Boris Kirienko was playing on one screen. Next to the president emptied a glass of brandy, presumably the night before. On the 3rd screen, the girls Alex had seen at the swimming pool were introduced to him. They were simpering and smiling in local gestures that left little to imaginations. Had he taken them to his room? If so, that would doubtless he have been recorded too. An image flickered, and there was the president giving his interview of one of the technicians. Must have been the footage taken by the woman in the drab green dress. Kirienko was talking directly to the camera in the manner of 1,000 politicians on Newsnight or Panorama. Totally serious, although he looked a little foolish in his flowery shirt. On the screen next to this one, the same Kirienko swam in the pool with one of the girls. What did it all mean? Why did I want this? Was the Casa d'Oro nothing more than the elaborate honey trap into which the President of Russia had unwittingly stayed. And he couldn't stay there any longer. Everything he had made it more urgent. Everything he saw made it more urgent for him to get out and warn the Americans. He was afraid he was going to miss the departure of the cars, and there would be a second chance. He opened the door and looked outside. The cars were still there, but the guards have gone. He looked at his watch. It was 2 o'clock. If lunch had finished already, it would do shortly. It had to be now. He ran forward to the nearest car and felt the boot release. Was it going to be locked? He found the silver button and pressed it, and to his relief, the boot opened. It was a big car with plenty of room. He threw himself inside, then reached up and pulled the lid back down, looking at it. At once he was trapped in pitch darkness, and he had to force himself not to panic. It was like being buried alive. He tried to relax. This was going to work, provided nobody opening to the boot to put luggage in. He wouldn't be seen. The limousine would drive him out of plantation, and when they were parked in Santiago, he would make his escape. Of course, the most difficult part was still to come. As he couldn't see out of the car, he couldn't even see his own hand in front of his face. He was totally blind. He would simply have to guess when the driver and his passengers had gone and hope for the best. It was also impossible to open the boot from the inside. It was for this reason that Alex had brought along the gum. He would choose the moment and use the gum to blow his way out. With a bit of luck, he would slip away into the crowd before anyone realized what happened. But already he was wondering if this had been a good idea. It was hot inside the boot. He could imagine the sun beating down on the car, and realized that he had locked himself into an oven, sweat and oozing out of every pore. His clothes was already sodden, and he could hear it dripping onto the metal surface beneath him. How much air was there in the trunk? If someone didn't make a move soon, he'd have to blow the car open while he was still in the compound and face the consequences. He fought down the panic and tried to breathe, and as shallowly as he could. His heart was thudding in his ears. He could feel the muscle hard at work in his chest as it pumped blood around his body. The veins in his neck and pulses were beating in rhythm. He wanted to stretch his legs, but he didn't dare move in case he rocked the car. The minutes ticked by, and then he heard voices. There was the echoing clunk of a car door opening, and the whole vehicle shifted from side to side as its passengers got in. Curled up in a foetile position, Alex waited for the boot to be thrown open, but it seemed that the president, or whoever was in the limousine, had decided not to bring any baggage. The car engine started up. Alex felt the vibration, and then suddenly they were moving. With Alex being jolted up and down as they started over the makeshift road. After about a minute, they began to slow down again, and Alex knew that they must be approaching the gate and checkpoint. That was another worry. Would the guards search the car? But he had already seen one limousine leave the villa that morning, and although the guards had been there, he hadn't seen anyone open the boot. The car had stopped. Alex didn't move. Everything was black. He had heard voices as if in the far distance somebody shouted something, but he couldn't make out a word they said. The car seemed to have been there forever. Why was it taking so long? Get on with it. Alex was finding it harder and harder to breathe. It felt as if the air was already running out. And then the car started forward, and he let out a sigh of relief. He could imagine the barrier rising to let them through. The Casa de Oro would be behind them now. How far was it to Santiago? How would he know for sure when they were there? The car stopped again. The boot opened. Cool sunlight came rushing in. Alex blinked, putting a hand to protect himself. "Get out!" a voice said in English. Alex climbed out, soaking wet with his own perspiration. Sarah was standing in front of him. Conrad was next to him, holding an automatic pistol, not even trying to hide the pleasure in his eyes. Alex looked around. The car hadn't even left the compound. It had simply rolled forward and turned round. That had been the movement he had felt. There were two guards watching him, their faces blank. One was holding a device that looked like a megaphone, the sort teachers use at a sports day. It was connected by a long wire to a box just inside the visit. If you had wanted to visit Santiago, you had only to ask. So said, but I didn't think you wanted to visit the city. I think you were running away. I said nothing. Oh, Juan. I still didn't speak. Sav gazed at the boy. He seemed pained, and if he understood why Alex had disobeyed him, and didn't know what quite to do. You disappointed me, Alex, he said at length. You were down at the caves. You saw the extent of my security arrangements there. Did you really think for a single minute that I would allow a car to drive in or out of this compound without knowing exactly who or what was inside? He suddenly reached out and took the megaphone device from the guard. He pointed it at Alex's chest and pressed a button. And once Alex heard a thumping sound that echoed through the air. It took him a second or two to read and said it was his own heart, amplified and transmitted out of the speaker system hidden somewhere into the guard's house. The car was scanned at the barrier, Sarah explained. Every car is scanned at the barrier. Using the machine I'm holding now, a sophisticated center. This is what the guard heard. You can hear it now. Thud, thud, thud. Alex was listening to his own heart. Sal was suddenly angry. Nothing in his face had changed, but his pale blue eyes had turned to ice, and there was dreadful deadness about him, as if his own life had been suddenly drained. Do you not remember what I told you? He whispered. If you tried to escape, you'd be shot. Conrad very much wishes to shoot you. I believe I am a fool to have you as my guest. He is right. Conrad stepped forward, the gun raised. Thud, thud, thud. An anxious heart was the animal inside him. Beyond his control responded the fear he felt. There was nothing he could do to hide it. The heart was beating loud and fast, echoing out of the speakers. I don't understand you, Alex. Have you no idea what I'm offering you? Did you not hear a word that I said? I offer you my protection, and you make an enemy of me. I want you to be my son, but you force me to destroy you instead. When I touched again the gun against Alex. Thud, 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 thud. Listen to the sound of your terror. Do you hear it? And when you hear the silence, it could be just a few seconds from now. This is when you will know you have died. Alex's finger tightened on the trigger. Lead Sauer turned off the sensor. The heartbeat stopped. Alex felt as if he had been shot. Sudden silence hit him like a hammer blow, like a bullet from a gun. He felt his ears hollowed out, barely able to breathe. He knelt there in the dust, his hands at his sides. He no longer had the strength to stand up. Sauer looked at him, and there was only sadness in his face. He had learned his lesson, he said. Take him back to his room. He put down the sensor and turned his back on the still kneeling boy. So he climbed back into the car. Well, everybody, that'll be the end of me reading you Alex Fire. So, bye, everybody, and thank you for listening.